Right, you're live.
Okay, Susan.
Thank you, Autumn. Is Judge Hendricks in a green room?
Well, I assigned her and she's still sitting here in our room.
She has to accept it.
Judge Hendricks,
Yep.
can you accept the move?
I took care of it. She's in there now.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. This is Susan Galpin-Tyree. I will be acting as vice chair this evening. I'm calling the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. on Tuesday, December 14th. This is the Judicial Appointments Advisory Board regular meeting. Autumn, would you please be so kind as to call the roll?
Yes, Brian Adamovich,
Present.
Susan Galpin,
Present.
John Gilbert,
Present.
Laura Engineeri,
Present.
Judge Kiefer,
Present.
Judge Marwell,
Present.
Tricia Schaefer.
Present.
Thank you. I just want to double check that Judge Hendricks is in a green room, please.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to confirm that or someone else. I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. Autumn, can you assist, or Brian, can you assist us with Judge Hendricks going to a green room, please?
Brian,
I'm adding her. She should be accepting. Let me do it again. Oh, well, that makes sense. Now let me do it. Now she should be in the green room. She is there.
Okay. Thank you,
awesome.
Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to remind everybody that when we get to item number 6, we have an opportunity to go into executive session if there is a need for it. You'll see on our notice and agenda that notice is hereby given that at any time during this meeting, the Judicial Appointments Advisory Board may make a motion to recess into executive session, specifically for item number 6 for obvious reasons. And so do know that when we get to number 6, if you feel there are confidential items that we need to discuss, please make a point of order and we will recess into that executive session. So item number 1, first, I would like to welcome our new board member. We welcome John Gilbert. It's nice to at least see your name on the line on screen, John. He's appointed to the Scottsdale Bar Association representative position of this board on October 12th. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you.
And then we're going to move on to item number 2 on our agenda, election of chairperson for this particular meeting. So I'm the vice chair, so we need to elect a new chair for the remainder of this year, should we need to meet again in 2021. And so to that point, I would ask if there's a nomination of someone who would want to be chair. I would throw my hat into the ring. If you would like to nominate me, or I can nominate myself to take the rest of this meeting, we will still then need to elect a vice chair if that's the case. So I will move that I nominate myself, and if there's a second, we can hear that. Thank you. And Autumn, would you, or rather, before we go any further, are there any other nominations? Thank you. Autumn, would you please take a roll call vote that I would continue this meeting the remainder of 2021 as chair.
Okay. Brian Adamovich,
Yes.
Aye.
Susan Galpin,
Aye.
John Gilbert,
Aye.
Laura Engineeri,
Aye.
Judge Kiefer, Judge Kiefer,
I'm sorry, I said aye. Do you not
Okay.
hear me?
we just now did,
Oh.
Judge Marwill,
Aye.
and Tricia Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you, board members. So I will act now as the chairperson for this particular meeting and the rest of 2021. A side note, we will have to do this again at the beginning of the calendar year next year. So at least we'll know how to do it. Now we need to nominate someone for vice chair. And in this case, I nominate Tricia Schaefer. I move to nominate Tricia Schaefer.
I
I'll
second.
Oh, okay.
A second with Mr. Gilbert.
Yes.
Autumn, would you please take a roll call vote?
Sure. Brian Adamovich,
Aye.
Susan Galpin,
Aye.
John Gilbert,
Aye.
Laura Engineeri,
Aye.
Judge Kiefer,
Aye.
Judge Marwill,
Aye.
and Tricia Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you, Tricia. That was a prize for you. Going on to number 3, the approval of October 4, 2021 Judicial Appointments Advisory Board meeting minutes. You all should have had a copy to review. Does anyone like to make, would anyone like to make a formal motion that we vote to approve this? I open the floor.
Motion to approve the meeting agenda.
Thank you. Brian, do we have a second? I second that we do move to approve it. Autumn, will you please take another roll call vote for us?
Sure. Brian Adamovich,
Aye.
Susan Galpin,
Aye.
John Gilbert,
Aye.
Laura Engineeri,
Aye.
Judge Kiefer,
Aye.
Judge Marwill,
Aye.
Tricia Schaefer.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Then the minutes have been approved. Item number 4, to public comment. Autumn, have we received any public comments via online today?
I have received none.
None.
Brian, have we received any?
No.
I'm sorry, Brian Hancock. He didn't tell me we received any, so no, I would
Okay.
assume no.
We will go with that. I will close the public comment portion at this time. So next, the agenda, I want to take a quick minute. We're just going to look at number 5 and number 6, just real quickly. First, we're going to discuss in number 5, the judicial survey results on Associate City Judge Stacia Hendricks. And so we can go to that in about 30 seconds. Let's then wait for number 6. Let's not discuss any confidential records and information related to this particular reappointment or her performance at this time while we're still in number 5. Sometimes we tend to blur the lines on these two. So item number 5, discussion of judicial survey results on Associate City Judge Stacia Hendricks. Board members, if you would go ahead and either click on the survey results link on the agenda electronically, or if you have it printed out in front of you, do I hear any discussion relative to the scores that we show for Judge Hendricks? I'll just make the note that I do see that we're all pretty, it's all pretty relative to the number 3 in some areas for the mean, and then the high 2-point 7, 8s, etc. Is there any discussion on the scoring? Judge Marwell? Judge Kiefer, any comments?
I'm sorry, I had trouble unmuting. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary with the scores. As I've said before in other meetings, it's not uncommon because the scores are a very small slice of the people that actually appear before you, for you to sometimes have 1 or 2 scores that are lower, but I'll note that this judge didn't seem to have that many fluctuations in scoring. So I didn't see anything that jumped out to me, but perhaps Judge Keeper may have more comments.
Thank you, Judge Marwell. Judge Kiefer, do you have a comment relative to the scoring? I see your hand is raised.
Yes, I just took note of the fact that when you look at the mean scores on Judge Hendricks under the attorney column, I did notice a difference between that and then the mean scores that show up for the all judges report. And it was pretty consistent down that column that those numbers were lower. It was interesting in the defendant witness column, the scores are very similar, Judge Hendricks, as compared to kind of the all judge scoring. When I saw some of those numbers in the attorney column, I wondered, and I didn't know at the time that I looked at these survey results, how long she had been on the bench, wondering if maybe she was a newer judge. But then I did go back and review the application, and it looks like she's been serving since about 2012. So I didn't see anything alarming. I just did take note of the difference.
Thank you, Judge Kiefer. I would, I did the same. I noticed the same. And again, not much fluctuation, as Judge Marwell had commented. However, I would remind the board that the area in which Judge Hendricks works is a very, can be very volatile and emotional, as of course all cases can be, but this in particular with domestic violence cases. So I'm thrilled that she has her plans in place and programs that she started here in Scottsdale. And yeah, and so I appreciate her request for reappointment. Do we have any other discussion of the survey results at this time? If so, please raise your hand electronically. No. Okay, we're going to, not hearing anything else, we're going to jump to then number 6. Is there any reason that any of our board members here today would request an executive session? I see no hands raised, and so I would say there is no need at this time. Number 7, discuss questions. I beg your pardon?
Let me, I'm sorry, Ms. Galpin, Tyree, let me interrupt you.
Please.
On number 6, that is in general a public discussion of the due diligence that each board member completed related to Judge Hendricks, and discussing that in a manner, if we're going to remain in a public setting, that doesn't violate confidentiality requirements.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Again, you all heard Ms. Heiser's comments. Judge Kiefer?
Yeah, I would say personally that the due diligence I conducted for the most part was very favorable. I think this is probably the time, if there was going to be discussion about some of the other commentary that was shared with the board, which again was generally very favorable. I did note there were a couple comments about possibly some leaning from the judge in terms of the rulings. Again, like Judge Marwell said, when you're dealing with relatively low numbers of respondents, those can be skewed. But I would note that there were at least a few people that felt like some of the rulings may have been inclined a little more toward the prosecution side.
This is Judge Marwell. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm not that technologically proficient on my phone.
That's okay,
Apologies.
please go ahead, Judge.
I wanted to sort of echo what Judge Kiefer said, and if I had one particular respondent that called back twice to my judicial assistant to make sure that I had gotten her message because I had a hearing, and felt really strongly that in a particular case, which I believe was on appeal, Judge Hendricks had been, in her words, biased in favor of the prosecution. I always take that with a grain of salt because part of the reason we have a court of appeals or a superior court, as the city may be, is because judges, even if they're not biased, may make mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as they conduct a courtroom, conduct themselves in a manner befitting the city or the court that they're on. But this particular respondent had some really strong feelings, but it was one person. And while occasionally a couple of other people mentioned it, the leaning toward the state, they said they understood why that would take place in the context that Judge Hendricks rules and that she was fair. If you wanted me to go into any more detail about that respondent, then perhaps we would need to go into executive session, but I don't think the person's name matters. It was similar to Judge Kiefer. Most of the comments I got were all favorable, but there was this one particular exception.
Thank you, Judge Marwell. Is there anyone else who cares to comment?
Yes, this is Tricia Schaefer, and it's interesting. I had a similar experience as what Judge Marwell described. Most of actually to a person, the comments were overall very favorable, but there was one individual in particular who had concerns about a bias to the prosecution over several specific examples. I mean, the person didn't go into tremendous detail, but seemed very eager to have that perspective heard.
I also heard similar comments from those that I talked to. Most were favorable or kind of in between. They didn't really have anything negative or anything real positive. But there were at least a couple that did indicate that they felt that she did show some bias towards the prosecution. One that gave some very specific examples where she wasn't consistent with her rulings. But other than that, I think I called, I don't know, a dozen or so. They were all pretty favorable.
Thank you for that. Again, anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go.
Thank you, Brian.
I did not have, I had more unfavorable than favorable. Again, as Judge Marwell pointed out, I take it with a little bit of a grain of salt based on the type of work that Judge Hendricks does. But some of the notes, they were a little bit surprising to me. I captured, I'll read a couple out loud. They won't identify anybody specifically. Temperament is very emotional, overreacts, doesn't make appropriate rulings based on emotions. Cited multiple occasions where her behavior wasn't appropriate and she changed her opinion. She has a very personal take on domestic violence. It's very harsh. One person identified her as being on her phone and not listening. A number of people said they have nothing negative against her personally, but dread having her as a judge. One person spent a good half an hour going off on their personal opinions of her, of being in her court, saying that she should not be reappointed, and then just really, really went into it. I've been doing this for a while, and this was on it, to be completely transparent, this is the first time I've had more than one negative. And I thought that was very surprising.
Thank you, Brian.
There we go.
And if the board is, oh, Mr. Gilbert.
This is my first time doing this, but I interviewed 13 different attorneys, and 4 of them were somewhat critical. I'd probably say highly critical. 7 of them said, very good marks, good experiences, no complaints. 2 of them were, they had slight complaints, but 4 out of 13, they were fairly strong. For example, some of my notes say highly critical, unprepared, rules in favor of the state 100% of the time. Another one, least favorite of the judges and is most likely going to rule for the state. Another one, dislikes going into her courtroom, needs to be more polite and considerate of attorneys, is smart and knows the law, but the demeanor's the complaint. And the final one, critical of her demeanor, attitude towards defense counsel. So 4 out of 13 struck me as unusual.
Judge Kiefer.
Can I make a motion at this time to go into an executive session? I'd like to dig deeper on this, and it might get into some of the more confidential nature of the feedback we received.
Okay, so is that a formal motion you made, Judge Kiefer?
It is.
Thank you. And we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Autumn, do you want to take a roll call vote that we go into executive session, please?
Sure. Brian Adamovich,
Aye.
Susan Galpin,
Aye.
John Gilbert,
Aye.
Laura Engineering,
Aye.
Judge Kiefer,
Aye.
Judge Marwill,
Aye.
Tricia Schaefer.
Aye.
Thank you. Autumn, we would ask, and Miss, let's see if I can get all of our names here in front of me. And then, of course, Ms. Heiser, please guide us as staff would guide us so that we know we are in executive session, please.
Brian Hancock.
I'm taking care of it.
Oh, thank you.
So we'll all stand by. You should have it.
So who needs to go in the room? I need to know. I
That
know all
would
the
be
board-
everyone.
I know all the
That would
board
be all
members.
the
And
board
e-scribers.
members and-
Does e-scribe?
Yeah, does
No.
Tina go? No.
No,
Okay.
Brian, I don't go into executive session.
Okay.
I go though.
How about city attorney?
Yes.
Donna, do you go?
That is up to Stephanie.
Brian, I go. Stephanie, do you want Donna in executive?
She's already over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Autumn,
Yes, ma'am.
question. May I assume everyone is back in our public
Yes.
meeting at the time?
Yes. Mhm.
Very much. Going on, thank you very much, members of the board. So number 7.
Video is disabled in this room. I just tried to turn on my video and it won't let me. It says you can't because the host disabled it. So I know.
Right. Yeah, I think we all are in that mode at this time in the public meeting.
All right, but I thought that we wanted to turn on our videos when we get to the next part of interviewing the judge.
When we interview Judge Hendricks on number 8, after we discuss the questions, we'll see if Brian with IT can get us to the public with our videos. Okay, number 7, discuss questions for interview of Judge Hendricks. So here is the time where we discuss possible questions, interview questions, in preparation for the formal interview that will follow this. Have anybody who would like to volunteer their first question? And if I could get some names listed of those who will like to ask questions, I can make a note to be sure to call upon you at the time.
I think one of the questions that we were provided is, do you project an image of fairness and balance in your rulings and in the treatment of prosecutors and defense lawyers? I think that would definitely be a good question to ask her.
Laura, will you take that question?
Yes, I may. I can.
Please. Thank you. So Laura has a very good question that sort of summarizes everything. Judge Kiefer?
I'm looking through some of the questions. That's the one that I hit on as well. So I was going to make that recommendation and Laura got it.
It's Judge Marwell. I was going to ask a more general question, perhaps before Laura got to her question, which I would like the judge to describe her view of her own demeanor, because I think it would show whether she is aware of any of those issues. And then perhaps you can ask the more pointed question that Laura indicated, but I always prefer to start with a more open-ended question.
Okay, Judge Marwell, may I count on you as our first person to ask a question?
Certainly.
Thank you very much. And then Laura, Ms. Engineering will go to you, and Ms. Schaefer.
There's a question on here. Tell us about your prosecution background and how that may affect your decisions. Seems like a good one to ask.
Okay, may I call upon you, number 3?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
We might want to do that number 2. So,
Okay.
and then the third one would be, do you project an image of fairness and balance?
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Laura. So Judge Marwell, and then Tricia, and then Laura. And let's see here. Let me look among us. Mr. Gilbert, do you have anything that comes to mind that you might like to ask?
Well, I definitely like the one that Tricia just got, but I also like the question down here. Have you ever felt that your temperament was ever less than it should be while in the presence of the public? And another one, which is number 5 on the first page, at this level of your career, we would expect you to know your own greatest weakness. What is it and how do you compensate for it in the workplace? I think I'd probably go with that one as the one I'd ask.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. You can take the question as you deem fit.
Okay.
Any other comments or suggestions for questions before we ask Judge Hendricks to be returned to the public so that we may welcome her? I will ask her if she has any opening comments and then let her know that we have several questions we would ask. Does anyone else have any comments prior to that? Okay. Brian? with the city IT. Number 8, we're going to interview Judge Hendricks right now. If we can have her from the green room, please.
Okay, she's been requested to join the main room. Oh, no. Come on.
Can we get video on for everyone?
All right,
Thank you.
she should be going into the main session. Hopefully she accepts. And there she is.
Yes. Hello, Judge Hendricks.
Hi, how are
Hi.
you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate your being here with us. And we would ask if you have any opening commentary you might like to share with us, any remarks prior to our coming to you with some questions that some of our board members have.
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay. Well, all right. Thank you for joining us again. And I will go ahead and ask Judge Marwell, do you have a question of Judge Hendricks?
Yes, good evening. I was wondering if you could start by telling us how you would describe your own demeanor and what persona you try to emulate from the bench.
My own demeanor, is that the question? Demeanor?
Yes.
Okay.
Temperament.
Well, you know, I think I start every day with the intent to get on the bench and sort of represent what is fair and just. I always intend to have the appropriate judicial demeanor. And that includes listening, that includes questioning, that includes creating an environment that's balanced. That's always my intent. But, you know, I'm human, so sometimes I falter. But I would say that it's every day, that's my intent when I take the bench, is to be the best version of that fairness and equity that I can be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Marwell and Judge Hendricks. And next, I would ask Ms. Schaefer, do you have a question you would pose to Judge Hendricks, please?
Yes, thank you. And good evening, Judge. Can you tell us about your prosecutorial background and how that may affect your decisions on the bench?
Oh, well, I was a prosecutor for 16 years, various jurisdictions, including this one. And that's how most everybody knew me before I was on the bench. You know, in terms of at this point, how it may impact, did you say how it impacts my rulings? What was the question?
Yeah, how it might affect your decisions if you think it does.
I don't think it does. Not at this point, 10 years in. And even in the beginning, I was a prosecutor as a profession or a job, but it was not who I was as a person. So I know that people believe me and have always believed me to be a biased or bend towards prosecution. I think a lot of it is because that's where I came from, but I don't think it has any impact on my role as a judge at this point. But I don't know that I'll ever shake that. You know, I have a bias towards the prosecution. You know, truth be told, I spend the majority of my time with defendants at this point in my career. And so, and it's a good amount of time post-adjudication. And so, you know, I'm not sure I can ever shake that. If there's still a perception out there on that, I don't know how much more I could maybe I would even ask for what it would be some like actual examples of sort of some bend towards prosecution and action. That might help me a little bit to know like what like an example of something I said or did.
Actually, Judge, this was a question more in an abstract sense, and rather than a focused sense on anything that has been observed. You know, specifically, but it's important for us to hear kind of your perception of
Sure.
your professional history and how that shapes your current role.
Yeah. I don't find much connection to it. Yeah, I don't know how to answer the question. I guess, is there some perception that I act like a prosecutor on the bench? I don't know. It's that same question comes to me every time I come for review. I don't know what the answer is. I think I asked before for specific feedback, like what is the thing that happens that makes people think I have a bend towards prosecution? The judges have like a little contest of like who finds people not guilty. I don't think that much matters. It's my court is there is a culture of accountability because it is a treatment court. Everyone's accountable, including me, the court staff, the litigants, counsel. I have high expectations of myself and others in the courtroom. Some people don't care for that, but because of the nature of the types of crimes, it's what's necessary. So that may all lend towards being pro-prosecution, but I don't think so. I think it lends towards helping people be a better version of themselves. And I think that the rules that surround what we do in the court support that. So I'm a rule follower. I ask for the people who appear in front of me to follow rules. Attorneys follow rules. Some people don't like that. So that may be the reason. But again, without like a specific example of you said this on this day, I can't really account for what others would perceive as a bend towards prosecution. So.
Thank you, Judge, for that thoughtful answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer and Judge Hendricks. And let's go to Laura Engineering, who has another question of you, Judge Hendricks.
Good evening, Judge.
Good evening.
I think you actually have really answered this question already, but I want to put it out there just in case you want to add anything else. But I think you may have covered it. The question is, do you think you project an image of fairness and balance in your rulings and in the treatment of prosecutors and defense lawyers?
Well, I think I do. And it is something that I strive to do. But remember, my thought about this is that this court is about the people. It's not about the lawyers. And so I get it that every lawyer does not love me, and I don't need that. My priority is about the people that the court serves, and that is the defendants. It's about the victims, the jurors, the witnesses, the citizens that come through the doors. This is the people's court. So yes, I have an obligation to the lawyers, and I want to be fair and I want to appear fair, and I do work hard to that aim, but that is not my ultimate goal, to make them happy. It is a priority for me because that is my job as well. So I do try to make that happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Engineer and Judge Hendricks for that. We have one more board member that would ask a question, and that's Mr. John Gilbert.
Judge, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I'm great. Thank you. Judge, what do you think is your greatest weakness? What do you think is your greatest weakness, and what is it that you do to compensate for that in the courtroom?
I do. I think a weakness of mine is that, I do expect attorneys to practice law, and sometimes they don't necessarily want to do that. And so, there are times probably when I should, I could be a little bit more flexible. And I'm talking about things like, you file a motion to continue 20 days prior to trial. That's what's in the rules. That's what I expect. So sometimes maybe they're not going to do it so much. Maybe I'm a little bit more flexible on that type of thing. But I'm a rule follower. And so that is my expectation. That's what's in the rules. That's what you should do as counsel, is file your motion on time. But I do think that it lends towards, I'm difficult or more difficult, or, I bend towards prosecution. Maybe I don't, but maybe you follow the rules as you should. So we have an issue there. So, I try to be a little bit more flexible here and there, but because of, my own sense of order, that my first reaction may be, well, why didn't you? Why didn't you do this? And that's probably part of the perception.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So thank you, Judge Hendricks. Do you have any concluding comments or anything you'd like to tell?
Well, there's two things I do want to say. The first is that this is a great job. I love it, and I work hard. The DV court has done a really good job. We have increased our compliance with treatment. We have more people that are completing the domestic nonviolence program, which is the mandatory program in Arizona for people who have been convicted of domestic violence. We have a DV work group, and I'm sure that some of the attorneys you spoke to, I invited them to come and be a part of the work group. I didn't get a lot of participation from private counsel, but I do have representation from private counsel, 2 attorneys, also public defenders, prosecutors, advocates, probation. They all participate in making this domestic violence specialty court the success that it is. Judge O has been very supportive. Judge Okovaj, I serve on 2 Supreme Court committees. I'm proud of that work. One of them is the Ethics Advisory Committee for judges. I'm able to go and train other judges. I've been to New York, participated with the Center for Court Innovation and sort of building my court into this, what we wanted it to be in terms of the specialty court. So this is a great job. And I do, to my second point, want to encourage this committee, if you have the opportunity, to try to urge for a more, a survey that gives more actionable feedback, because what this has been for the balance of my 10 years on the bench is a feedback that's not really actionable. And I would welcome, some specifics in terms of what I could do to at least change the perception that I am more pro-prosecution. One of the things that we do in the work group is collaborate on ways that we could all be better. And so I'm open to that. But these surveys as written and as responded to do not allow for feedback that is really actionable. I think this committee has the ability to ask for a more comprehensive survey, something that people are able to write, give actual examples of the things that may bother them about the court or a judge. because I certainly welcome any opportunity to be a better judge, no matter where it comes from. So that's all I want to say. I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I will continue to work hard.
Thank you, Judge Hendricks. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the time that you took this evening to speak with us. And we'll let you have your evening to yourself now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, board members. That was a good discussion. Let's go to item number 9 for us, and we can further discuss the reappointment recommendation that we may make regarding Judge Hendricks. This is an action that we have to take, as Ms. Heiser commented. We need a formal motion after discussion and then a vote, and then we'll ask Autumn to take a roll call vote on this. Do I hear anyone? Is there any comment from the floor, from the board, relative to further discussion or recommendation before we take our roll call vote? Judge Marble?
Muted.
We can't hear you, Judge.
I'm sorry. I raised my hand but failed to unmute myself. Sorry about that. I deal with it every day in court. You think I would know how to do it on my own phone, but that's okay. What I was struck by is that Judge Hendricks seemed very aware of the perception that ran through the comments, yet was at a loss of how to deal with it. And part of me understood that because it is hard to hear things about yourself. I will tell you, having been the recipient of surveys that are not always the easiest, particularly when you do get to read the comments, because when you do work, I was a family court judge, now I'm a juvenile judge. On family court, there's a lot of people that don't like you. And in domestic cases, there's a lot of people that don't like you. But what struck me about her answers is that if you know that there's a perception about you, then I think it is incumbent upon you to begin working on it in the ways that you can. And I think one of the things I found frustrating in her answers was, well, I don't know what to do about it unless you give me specific examples. And so while I do support perhaps recommending to the city, if we reappoint, that she be given specific comments with perhaps names and other identifying features removed to protect confidentiality, I think I almost wanted to ask her follow-up questions. Well, what training would you like for the city to give you to combat that perception? Because I think that we do have an obligation as public servants to keep bettering ourselves. So if you know there's a perception about you, you can't always change it, because some of the perceptions are just based on who you are. And I will tell you that women judges often tend to get differing and more negative perceptions in surveys, because we've looked at this across the board, than men. But I also was struck that she's obviously heard this before and yet not been able to articulate actions that she's taken or wants the board to recommend be taken to combat it. So I understand the difficulties with that, but it did strike me that she seemed either unwilling or unable to figure out where to go from here. So as a board, if we recommend reappointment, we should probably make those suggestions, because I wanted to do a follow-up questions. Well, what training would you like us to recommend the board give you to help you with this perception? And it's too bad, because I felt that she's a very gifted jurist in a lot of ways when she spoke about the things that she had done and tried to incorporate in the court. So I would not like to see this perception stand in her way of being a good public servant, but that was something I just wanted to express.
Thank you, Judge Marble. Mr. Gilbert, do you have a comment?
I think the points made are well taken. She did make one comment that I took umbrage with. She said, this is about the people, not about the lawyers. Her goal is not to make the lawyers happy. I mean, I agree with that, but we still need to be respectful to the lawyers, as well as, of course, the people, as she calls them. But I mean, she definitely sounds like she's open to constructive criticism. I just don't know how we go about doing that. You know, we could ask her as the judge suggests, but I doubt that she'd come up with anything. How is it that you change an attitude, if you will, particularly after she's been on the bench now for, is it 12 years? 9 years, I think. I don't know. It's kind of a tough call, frankly, because I think she's sincere. I think she's probably done a great job with the court she's in, with the domestic violence. I'm torn between two directions. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
And Judge Kiefer?
I was a little bit troubled by a similar part of the answer. There seemed like there was some almost tacit animosity toward the attorneys. And I think that probably shows through in some of the courtroom demeanor. It's one thing if you say, look, I know, and on this kind of calendar, many people are going to be unhappy, and so they may view me a certain way because of that. But it seemed to go a little bit beyond that, and just a simple acknowledgement of, yeah, some people are unhappy. So that was a little bit concerning. I had a question that I was thinking of posing about if it were recommended that you take certain type of training to try to improve on the perception of fairness and lack of bias. Would you be open to that? I think by the end, she kind of answered, suggesting that she would be. I wasn't sure of that in the beginning part of the interview. I think by the end, she answered the question, so I didn't put my hand up to pose it. I think I'm similar to where I was earlier in our meeting. And we find a way to make some recommendations that some training in that regard happen. It's a little concerning that she did acknowledge an awareness of this, but it wasn't clear that improvement has been made over her tenure on the bench. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Kiefer. And Laura, you have a comment?
I do, thank you. Just a few things. I mean, it is clear that she knows there's some issues there, but she doesn't have the specifics. I don't know that providing the specifics necessarily would help, because then she's going to go back through those cases, I would think, and try and figure out why there's that perception. Instead, maybe focus on going forward. And there's certainly training that can be offered to her. There's maybe another judge that could sit in with some of her rulings and just give her some suggestions, like peer coaching, or there's professional coaches out there that can kind of sit through and watch how she's being portrayed throughout the process. So those are some ideas that we can recommend. I appreciate the fact that she was aware of what was going on and wants to do something differently, wants to improve on that.
Thank you, Laura. Tricia?
Thank you. I think she made some very insightful comments targeted to kind of a disconnect. And I think that's a good way of putting kind of what's going on here, where she knows the issue and is kind of flummoxed as to how to go about, you know, addressing it, wanting examples and things like that. And I thought she made a good comment about how the surveys and the statistics aren't actionable and aren't helpful. And, you know, earlier in the process, I was kind of skimming through these surveys as we were talking, and you know, we would hear comments in our due diligence from certain individuals about bias per se. And then we're looking at these surveys, and bias per se is not really addressed in that form. I mean, yes, we see things like integrity and we see things like temperament and things like that. But In some respects, I think she does make a point that maybe the tools and the disconnect don't really aren't really helpful. And what we hear from certain lawyers about, a perception of bias. I mean, one benefit of being a lawyer is you get to represent lots of clients and lots of cases and see judges in action over a period of time, when the people filling out the survey, it may just be more of a snapshot. And so I think this is maybe indicative of a need to kind of take a fresh look at the process, while simultaneously addressing, the perception and what we're getting here, because we clearly see a willingness to adapt, but there's a disconnect in the process in getting there. So I actually I had a very favorable impression of the judge's comments this evening, more so than, I felt better at the end of her talk than at the beginning.
Thank you, Tricia. Brian, you have a comment?
Yeah. She seemed almost frustrated by about the issue with the issues that she faces. And I got the impression that she wants to change that, and she is taking steps. She talked about the work group and how she wished more people were part of that. I appreciated her comment about, the culture of accountability, and that people just need to follow the rules and do their jobs. And I got the impression from that, she wants to, she has narrow lanes. She expects people to follow those narrow lanes. But at the same time, she also appreciates some of the frustrations that might have been felt about her in the past, and she wants to work towards improving on those.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any other comments from any of the members before we make a formal motion? Judge Marvel? And we need you to turn your sound on, please.
Last time we discussed whether we could add things to the surveys, and we learned from the city attorney that we could not. All we can do is make recommendations, and that it's outside of our goal as a board to make changes to the survey. So that seems to me to be something that, if we think is appropriate, would have to be addressed by a different body, maybe the city itself. So I will tell you that these evaluation processes are often frustrating to judges. Perhaps Judge Keeper knows too. In Superior Court, it's called JPR. And to be frank, nobody particularly likes it. I think it's taken with a gritting of the teeth, part of being a public servant. That being said, there is a judicial observation program that she could sit through and see herself through the eyes of the observer. And that may be something we can recommend that they make available to her.
Thank you, Judge Marwell. I do recall as well the comment about the surveys and how that is out of our purview. Any other comments? Okay, if no further comments, do I hear a formal motion from a board member as to the reappointment of our recommendation to reappoint Judge Stacia Hendricks? Do I hear?
Make a motion to reappoint her. This is Judge Marwell.
Thank you, Judge Marwell. And thank you, Laura, for the second. Autumn, would you please take a roll call vote?
Can I clarify something before we vote?
Yes.
So I understand how we've typically done this. I want to know if I can add to the motion that this body will make some recommendations in a summary, that there be some type of training offered and or required, at least offered as part of a reappointment. Now, whether the council does that and whether they deem that that's appropriate, but I feel strongly that that should be part of the recommendation. So if you're just asking me to vote straight on reappointment, if that's how we're clarifying this vote, that may come out different than if added to that is that we put something in the summary regarding additional recommendations for training.
Then I would recommend that
I'll amend my motion to add that if we vote for reappointment, we will include some of our suggestions for training and addressing the issues that we have noted as a board. Does that address your concern, Judge Kiefer?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge Marvel. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tricia. Autumn, would you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Brian Adamovich,
I do vote in favor of reappointment on the condition of suggested training and other steps.
Susan Galpin,
Yes, I agree. We would recommend her for reappointment with those conditions attached in the summary.
John Gilbert,
I will vote in favor of a reappointment, but just for the record, the conditions are very important. But for those, I probably would not be voting that way, but I will vote under the circumstances with the condition attached.
okay, Laura Engineering,
I agree with the motion.
Judge Kiefer,
Yes, to the amended motion, yay.
okay, Judge Marwill,
Aye.
and Tricia Schaefer.
Aye.
And the motion has passed that we will recommend Judge Hendricks for reappointment with those particular conditions noted as to training and self-awareness concerns. Thank you very much.
And I want to just clarify for the board, the recommendation will be to council in your letter to council, correct?
Correct.
That was the motion. So then the next step before we move on to the next timeline is to appoint someone, the chief of doing that letter, if you will, work with HR staff to make that recommendation to council.
So I have a question, Stephanie. Typically, I work with the chairperson to write the letter, but how do I get suggestions from the board members on the additional comments or the training? Because we can't talk amongst each other within an email. So how do we do that?
May I comment, Autumn?
Yes.
Thought. I would defer to Judge Marwell or Judge Kiefer in this regard. And so I could absolutely remove this vice chair position from that, or the chair position from that, if that would comport with the rules. And if one of the judges would be so kind as to accept. Any discussion among?
Well, I thought since we're in a meeting, we should probably have a discussion so that it's not one person's idea of what the board was looking for in terms of the conditions. But I can summarize what I understood. I think we recommend the appointment, but the members of the board had reservations and would highly recommend the following: that that training be offered to Judge Hendricks, designed to address demeanor concerns, and then give some examples, not drawing from specific comments, but concerns over a bias toward the prosecution and to give her skills to recognize that in how she conducts a proceeding, including but not limited to participating in judicial observation, mentorship opportunities, and the like, because that's what I heard other people say. And then if there are trainings being offered by the statewide Arizona Judicial College, we could look into that and then recommend that she participate in those. But that's what, I don't know if Judge Kiefer was looking for something else. Judge Kiefer?
I'm in agreement with that.
Thank you. Autumn, would we be able to use the recorded comments as part of our summary then?
Yes.
Be the
Right.
one that
Yes.
makes myself, that makes
Yes.
myself available to the city council and presents the letter, et cetera.
And if I may be heard briefly on this issue, please. I think it's important to convey how this feedback is going to be received. I think is going to be very important. This is a step that isn't taken routinely or often. And for that reason, I think it's important that we also reflect in the letter that Judge Hendricks herself seeks this feedback, seeks this input, and that, you know, it's more of a mutual understanding that she desires actionable feedback, actionable information, rather than sort of a, you know, we think she needs training and blah, blah, blah. And I think if it's written and presented in a way that isn't just constructive, but reflects a mutual desire between this board and this judge to enhance performance, I think it will be better received, and I think it'll be more effective.
I would agree. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, I do too. Great point.
And if no one's chomping at the bit to draft this, I'm happy to do it, because I don't normally step up to do work because I'm busy like everybody else. But I'm kind of composing this in my head, and I wouldn't mind taking a shot at it, taking into account. And I don't mean to step on Judge Marwell and Judge Kiefer because I know they're busy too. But I've listened carefully to what you've said, and if it's okay, if I could take a run at it.
Is it something
I
that?
think, if I may, I think one thing that you could consider as well is to have a summary of these meeting minutes or an actual transcript of our meeting attached to the council recommendation so that the council members can hear exactly what the board has discussed regarding Judge Hendricks.
So Autumn, is this something that Tricia can work with you on then? Yet I can take the mantle as chair to present it to council and to do anything further that this role requires?
Yes, I mean, if you guys are in agreement, then Tricia can certainly write the letter. Stephanie, is the letter, once it's drafted, is that something we would send to the board and get individual feedback from the board members on? Like, are you good with it or not? Is that something we could do, Stephanie?
I think that's a little bit more difficult question. Typically, like, this is an unusual situation. I think that if the letter outlines what we've discussed or what the board has decided in this meeting and attaches the minutes or something, I think the only way that you could do that would be to send a draft to each individual board member.
Got it.
And I think if there was any real issues, we'd have to re-meet in a public meeting to discuss those.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Tricia, for offering to help scribe that, and Autumn. Number 10, This is new presiding judge timeline discussion. This is something I would ask Autumn or Ms. Heiser to address. It's for our information and discussion only.
Okay, so just real quick, the city has an option to do in-person or hybrid or online like we're doing now. So tomorrow, I'll probably be sending everybody an email to see what your preference is for our next 2 meetings on January 11th, which we'll be discussing the applications and developing interview questions for all 8 candidates. I was thinking 4 to 8 because it's going to be a long one. We might even need more time than that. And then the 25th, we have to interview at least 6 people. I was thinking 2 to 8 on the 25th. So I'm just throwing that out there. We need to kind of narrow down timeframes so that I can get those invites out to you guys.
I'm sorry, wait, were those times? Those
Yes.
2 to 8, can you do that one more time? I didn't realize what you were saying.
That's okay.
But Adam, I can't do it before 5 because I have hearings already set throughout the entire month of January that have been set for months. So I can't do that. I would have to be late because I already have, I'm a juvenile judge and I have trials set in the afternoon that have been set for months.
Well, if we don't start till 5, those are going to be really late nights.
Well, I'm just telling you, it wasn't
Yeah.
told to us in advance so that we could mark off our calendars. So I'm not in a position where I can vacate hearings 3 weeks from the hearing date.
Okay.
So
What are those dates again, Autumn?
January 11th and January 25th.
Tuesday
They're
and
both Tuesdays, yeah.
Tuesday.
Mhm.
And what were the original times that you were proposing? I understand the conflict, but
4 to 8 on the 11th, and then 2 to 8 on the 25th. Someone has suggested to me, Stephanie has suggested to me tonight, if we did the 11th and maybe the 12th, we did 5 candidates one night and 3 candidates and discussed interview questions, talking about applications, sorry, and then discussed interview questions, did that 2 nights in a row. That might alleviate some issue for the 11th, but the 25th, interviewing at least 6 new people, that could be a long day.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, the other option would be to have the interviews happen on a weekend
Yeah,
during the day.
instead of the 25th, like the 22nd or the 29th.
Yeah, I would not be averse to that, but I just want to be fair to the candidates, you know, and
Yeah, weekends are far preferable than long weekday meetings going into the evening. For me.
And just so you know, there are previous boards have interviewed candidates for new appointments on the weekend.
On the
and
weekend.
It's been kind of a very on the weekends, yes, and a long all-day affair, if you will, depending on how many interviews you have. Like Autumn said, the code requires at least 6 interviews.
Okay, so if we keep in the same timeline, because the council, the people you guys choose are on their calendar for the week of the 9th, 10th. So the 15th of January and the 29th of January, that would just be 4 days later each week, if that makes sense. And those will both be Saturdays.
So if we were looking at a Saturday, is it possible to just do one day?
for both of those incidences? I don't think so,
No.
because we'd have to discuss all the applications for all 8. And you guys would discuss your due diligence stuff that you are working on now. And then you'd have to come up with interview questions. And then on top of that, decide who you want to interview, and then interview at least 6 of those people. That would be a marathon.
Well, what if the 11th, the date you originally proposed,
Uh-huh.
that would be just to talk about the candidates and talk about interview questions and
Yes.
not any actual interviews, right?
Correct.
And so what if that slid to something like 5 to 9? You said 4 to 8.
Yes. Okay.
And then what if the interviews were all conducted on one Saturday? Is
Okay.
that
What does everybody think? And then the interviews, they're really wanting us to preferably do in person.
Yeah.
I think that schedule would work depending on the Saturday. I mean, I think probably a lot of us already have Saturdays planned, so I would want to get the date settled tonight.
If we kept in line with, like I said, 2 weeks later, it would be the 29th or the 5th. But if we did it the 5th, well, we would know by the 9th who's going to council.
I'm
So
sorry, Autumn.
yeah.
Good.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Autumn. Did you say January 29th?
29th or February. Well, it would have to be 2 weeks later from the 11th. So the 29th of January or the 5th of February.
I'm sorry, this is Donna Brown. February the 5th would not be enough time for council.
The 29th is fine with me.
29th is probably the best bet.
The 28th is a Friday.
29th.
Oh, okay.
I can avail myself, Autumn, whatever day you need.
Okay, so is everybody good with the 11th, 5 to 9?
Yep.
Trisha?
Yes.
Okay. Brian?
Could we make 5:30? Because if we have here go till 5, I
Okay.
don't know worse, but I mean, I have to clear the courtroom and get done with that, because if you've ever been in a court hearing, they don't always end right at the time allotted.
Okay. So noted, 5:30 to 9-ish.
I will probably have some family obligations, so I'll have to probably jump off. Usually 7 is about as late as I can go.
Okay. Anybody else? I know, Susan, you said you were good.
Yes.
And Laura?
Yes.
Okay. All right. How about the 29th of January?
I'm sorry, will the 11th be in person or virtual?
Well, I believe we can still do that virtual, but how does everybody kind of want to do that?
Virtual would be preferred.
Virtual is fine.
Okay.
Say,
Okay, so virtual on the 11th from 5:30 to when we're done.
Right.
And then the 29th, which is a Saturday. Do we want to start early? 9, 10, and
9.
9?
Yeah, earlier rather than later start in my.
Sure. So 9 to probably 3 o'clock-ish
And in person.
in person
Where would that be?
here at the courtyard. 91st in San Salvador, sorry.
The Via Linda and 90th area.
Yeah.
That's fine by me.
Okay. So everybody's good with the 29th?
Yep.
Brian?
yes. Oh,
Sorry.
As of right now, I have a conflict, but I'm gonna do what I can.
Okay. Trisha?
yes.
Okay. Laura?
Yes.
Judge Kiefer, you've been kind of quiet.
Yes, I'm good with both dates.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's,
Do you have everything you need from us, Autumn, on that?
I believe so. Are there any other questions you guys have about the rest of the timeline?
No
Okay.
other questions, Autumn?
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. So we'll close number 10. Number 11, future agenda items. Well, we can't do anything about, no discussion, but if there's something that you want on the agenda going forward, this is the time to comment. However, I think our plates are rather full the next upcoming months. So I don't have anything to add. And nor does it appear anyone else does at this time. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. And Autumn, will you please take the final roll call vote of the evening?
Yes. Brian Adamovich,
Aye.
Susan Galpin,
Aye.
John Gilbert,
Aye.
Laura Engineering,
Aye.
Judge Kiefer,
Aye.
Judge Marwell,
Aye.
and Tricia Schaefer.
Aye.